Trojan fans, welcome to another edition of Tunnel Vision, but this is my Peristyle podcast intro. I don't know, this is sort of a hybrid Peristyle podcast, Tunnel Vision. They are that way anyway. The game was weird. This show's going to be weird. It's like the end of the regular season, the end of the year. It's Connor Morrissette, Mr. Triple-Double himself, and me, Ryan Abraham, publisher of USCFootball.com, in studio, doing our post-game wrap-up, season wrap-up show. It's our Tunnel Vision slot, but we didn't get to do our podcast, so we're kind of putting this all together. I'll do some email questions like we do in the podcast. We'll do live chat stuff from the YouTube, and we're going to be live on Facebook as well. And, of course, we got to hear from Mr. Triple-Double. Connor is in studio. We just got back from Vegas, drove back yesterday. How you doing, Connor?
Doing well. That was a late game Friday, but good to be back here in L.A., and what a comeback win for USC. I thought when A&M went up 24-7, and I said it in instant analysis, I thought when they went up the 3 scores in the third quarter, that was going to be it. But USC, they kept fighting like they've done all year, and it was good to see them pull out a victory. So very encouraging. Very encouraging.
I think I turned to you in the press box and was like, I think they're going to come back and win. But I don't know if it was that.
You did say that, and I wasn't convinced, so I got to give you credit for that.
I just had a feeling that they were going to do it, but that might have been before it was 24-7. I don't know if I said that at 24-7, but it was somewhere, 24-7, which is where we are. If you can see my shirt, 24-7. But that was the score. Yeah. It wasn't like halftime. It was late
5 minutes left.
Late in the third quarter. I think 3.5 minutes or something in the third quarter. Down 24-7. USC comes back and wins 35-31. So we're going to talk about that game and everything that means, some of the weird stats and weird sort of observations we've made over this season, because it's very weird. Like, I texted some people that I know work at USC, and they kind of agreed with me on this. I'm like, USC probably had no business beating LSU or Texas A&M, and they won both those games.
I think they had business beating LSU.
Well, I mean, they were down that whole game too, right? Or most of the time.
It was back and forth. LSU never really separated.
Right. Oh, yeah. Then LSU got the 2-score lead, and then it was like, all right. I think LSU had the 2-score lead and the ball, if I'm not mistaken. They could have won that game for sure. But this one, the way it was going, even in the first half, it was tied 7-7, but Texas A&M should have been up more. I mean, there were some turnovers and stuff.
If the touchdown pass that ended up being intercepted by Reed, where it doinked off the guy's helmet, that would have put him up 14-0.
Like literally hit the receiver in the head.
And then USC scores to make it 7-7. Like, if they go down 14-0, I think it's a totally different game, because that pick did give USC a lot of momentum. That was early, though, so I'm not saying a comeback was impossible, but they got a fortuitous bounce, and they made the most of it, which, hey, they were not getting fortuitous bounces earlier in the year, and sometimes even when they weren't making the most of it. So that was nice to see him pounce on that momentum, get a touchdown, and then, the first half offensively was ugly outside of that drive. And then in the second half, I mean, I was ready at halftime to say, different opponent, different team, but last year in the bowl game, they had 28 points at halftime against Louisville, and then they scored 28 points in the second half against A&M. So you got to give them credit for the offense bouncing back, but Jayden Maiava was certainly up and down, and I know we're going to talk about him a lot.
We'll get into that too, yeah. But when it was 24-7 and it's like late in the third quarter, you're like, all right, they're probably not going to win this game. Yeah. But like you said, credit where credit is due. Maiava was all over the place and makes the throws when he needs to, and they come back and win. The defense gets 3 stops in a row, including a short field off an interception. But, like, if you were betting, like, you're probably, there was how many of those games USC had a 90% chance to win and lost during the season? This was sort of the opposite of that. Like, in general, you're probably not winning this game. USC did. But there was a bunch of games during the season that USC had no business losing either. So it's kind of weird how that all works out. But to get a bookend in Las Vegas of, beating the SEC and LSU in week 1 and sending those fans into a drunken stupor. We were talking about walking back from Allegiant Stadium. Remember an LSU fan puking on the side? He's like, Chris pointed out, like, was it?
I put it out.
You put it out, yeah.
Hey, that's where that LSU guy was
puking. And then doing the same thing to Texas A&M fans and walking through the casino, seeing them gambling. And this was like 1:30 in the morning by the time we got back or whatever. But it was just sort of a weird way and kind of a fitting way to bookend this, where USC has 2 wins over the SEC. And Lincoln Riley's former team, Oklahoma, went 2-6 against the SEC this year. The same number of wins. Those kind of things are funny. but it doesn't take away from the fact that like you were Maryland's only Big Ten win, and the fourth quarter leads you blew. So it's just sort of this weird way to kind of look at the entire season. Like I'm previewing, for the podcast with champions, the college football playoff games. Penn State's playing Ashton Gentry. I mean, the Heisman finalist, right? The runner-up to the Heisman. Is he going to get 100 yards? Do you know Penn State hadn't give up a 100-yard rusher all season except for Woody Marks?
Yeah.
Like, how crazy is that? Like, stupid stuff like that. Like, was USC
definitely should have won that game?
Yeah, USC was 6-6 during the regular season. Like, you look back, you're like, there's no way that should have happened. But you needed something positive, and you get the good win, the comeback win. We'll kind of take some takeaways from it, but it was I think it was a fitting end to like a wacky season. It was a wacky game.
It tied the largest comeback win for USC under Lincoln Riley. They were down, I think, 17-0 to Arizona last year, and then came back and won that game in those overtimes. And they had that crazy play where Caleb Williams wasn't under center, or maybe he was under center, but all the offensive linemen were on the other side of the field. I'm sure fans will remember that game well. But USC being down 17 points at the end of the third quarter and coming back and winning, that's something that it's a fluky bowl game where both sides have a lot of opt-outs, but like for your culture and just for next season with some of the impact guys who had big roles in that comeback coming back, I think we learned last year, Ryan, you can't say definitively because they did this in the bowl game, this is going to happen, but a comeback like that makes you feel pretty good about next season when Jayden Maiava is probably going to be the quarterback. He was instrumental in the comeback. Mekhi Lemon, of course, Jacoby Lane, of course. Some of the young offensive linemen did really well in this game. I don't know how many of those guys will play next year, but like that's a foundational win with some younger players who will be back next year after being down 17 points. That's an experience that a lot of guys will learn from and take away from and be better for it. So again, I don't know definitively what's going to happen next year and who will do what, but I think coming back from 17 points down, that's going to really help these young guys. I
agree with you there. We got to talk about, start with the quarterback play. Jayden Maiava, looked, I don't know, fairly terrible on a lot of throws. Ends up with 3 picks. My keys to victory was don't have any picks. If you remember against Notre Dame, he looked really good until the last couple minutes, throws 2 pick sixes. A couple early picks in this one and then a late one, and they were still able to bounce back and come back from it. Jasper has some comments in the chat. He's saying, people keep saying Maiava's young. However, this guy has 15 starts under his belt now. He needs to clean up his game, or it'll be another 7-5 season in 2025, despite the easy schedule. And I think that's probably job number 1 in the offseason, Connor. If you're going to go with Jayden Maiava as your QB1, I think the turnover worthy plays, that needs to come down. I mean, I love the short memory and being able to bounce back and not hang your head after throwing a pick, but you don't want to be throwing 3 picks and have to come back from that. Like you'd rather throw, maybe 1, but not 3. We've seen a lot of that. So I don't know what your thoughts on Maiava's game as a whole.
Yeah, he puts the ball in harm's way too much, and that I think is probably the biggest headline with him after his 5 games starting with USC. He was exceptional against Notre Dame until those 2 pick sixes. Now you can't just throw those out, but if you're a Maiava supporter and you think he's the guy, just look at that Notre Dame film, because that's a really good defense, and he was lights out in that game. But then 3 picks against A&M, and he was a little shaky, of course, against UCLA. He had the pick 6 against Nebraska. He's had a couple fumbles. It just hasn't been very pretty at times with him. It's either things are going exceptionally well or things are going terribly, and that's not really a good spot to be if you're a quarterback. I think the most concerning thing for me, Ryan, in this game, so Texas A&M, their top 3 defensive linemen all opt out of the bowl game and don't play. And USC's makeshift offensive line, I felt like, held up pretty well. And Jayden Maiava had a month plus to prepare for this singular opponent, and then to come out and play the way he did when the protection was fine and he had all this time to prepare, like, he finished strong and he deserves credit for that. But I think the bigger story is how poor he played earlier on in that game, because that wasn't really that hard of a spot with the opt-outs and with how well USC's offensive line played. And to be not on the same page with some guys, I mean, that pick from his own end zone, Mekhi Lemon ran one route, Maiava thought he was running the other route. You had 5 weeks to prepare. Stuff like that just can't happen. And the first interception, he had that lofted pass to Lemon that shouldn't have been thrown. He had passes batted down. I thought that was a really, really tough performance from him. But the fact that he did lead USC back and they won, of course, that's a big part of this too. But you're evaluating for next season, and if you're Lincoln Riley watching this tape, what do you think? I feel like you have to think, well, I like that he brought us back, but if we're going against a defense that has all their NFL guys and is better, I don't know if I can totally trust this guy. And we saw at the end of the half, it didn't really look like Lincoln Riley trusted Maiava. So it's a huge offseason for him because I do think his ceiling is still high and he has a chance to be a special quarterback. But in these 5 games, he's made way too many stupid mistakes and way too many throws that you just scratch your head and say, what was that? So I feel lowercase g, like lowercase o, okay about him heading into next season. But I don't really think you could possibly feel like, okay, this guy's going to lead us to where we want to be. He's been too up and down.
No, I agree with you there. And that's going to be one of the things, last year, not everyone was on board with Miller Moss after the 6 touchdown performance, but
I certainly was.
Yeah, there was more people that were than weren't, and now it's still like kind of a mixed bag. And a lot of people I know, they're like, you can't go with this guy as your starting quarterback, but he will have a whole offseason with Lincoln Riley and kind of figure out what you want to do. There wasn't, not a lot of big name quarterbacks in the portal. There was one that entered today, the guy from South Dakota State, I believe. But, we'll see the spring window. And if Lincoln Riley wants to do that. So we're just not sure. So we'll see sort of where that goes. Just to let everyone know, I didn't really do the intro at the top, but we are live on YouTube and Facebook. So if you're watching us live, thank you very much. You can comment on YouTube and Facebook. And if it's a question, I will start. We'll get to it at the end. Or if it's a comment, I will try to look at it and put it up on the screen when, after, when I'm done talking and Connor's talking, I'll look at some of these questions or comments and I'll put them up on the screen. I also wanted to thank our sponsor, Trader Joe's, who've been awesome to us over the years. I might go to the Rose Parade, Connor. I don't know if you've been, check it out, but Trader Joe's has a float.
Oh, nice.
And they've sent me tickets in the past, so they sent me some tickets this year. So I might go down there for that one. Probably will. And it's pretty fun. It's one of those things that's like people know about Los Angeles, because it's cold wherever you're watching on New Year's Day, and you get to see the Rose Parade and stuff. It's usually pretty cold in Pasadena at the time, but I might go down there. So thanks Trader Joe's for that. And you can go over to TraderJoe's.com and check out different recipes and things that they have there. Front page over at TraderJoe's.com, they have jelly donuts. Little jam donuts. I just saw the Pop-Tart bowl, which is fun. These look like little kind of mini Pop-Tarts the way it's set up with the sugar and everything. But you can go check it out. There's a little video on there if you want to make your own homemade jelly donuts. All the ingredients over at Trader Joe's, and you can check out TraderJoe's.com for everything there. So thanks again to Trader Joe's.
Shout out Trader Joe's. One of my favorite stores, one of my girlfriend Chloe's favorite stores.
Yes.
She loves shopping there too. We love shopping there together. So thank you for all the happy memories, Trader Joe's.
The mythical girlfriend Chloe. Does she really exist? Oh wait, she's in the other room. Yes. Yeah. She was at the LSU game. Didn't come out for this Vegas one, but yeah. So she's probably got her headphones on. You can't hear us and stuff. So wanted to put a comment up here, a little bit more on Maiava too. I wanted to get. And some people said that I might have said Jason Maiava instead of Jayden Maiava, and I said Gentry instead of Genty.
Sorry. You've done 3 shows today.
This is my 3rd freaking show today. I just got off a live show for the Podcast of Champions. I'm not, a little under the weather. I got cough drops and stuff. So my apologies if I said a syllable of a name wrong or something.
I didn't hear it. Maybe I said it.
No, maybe I'm not sure what it was. But Connecticut Yankee, this is like right up our alley as we're a couple of New Englanders. Maiava more effective on dropbacks and rollouts as opposed to RPOs, was more prone to block passes, and instead of driving the ball, he tended to flip it often off of his back foot. And I wanted you to address this. There were too many, blocked passes for sure, but I would disagree on the RPO. There were times when he handed it off, and USC's run game was pretty effective. We're going to get to that. But and where there was defenders there for the running back, and maybe he breaks a tackle, but it looked like lanes were open for him if he was going to keep it. I would have liked to see him run a little bit more. And even the earlier show today, Harvey Hyde said, when you're having a rough game, sometimes you just need to get hit. Just get hit, and then maybe you'll
he took some hits.
Yeah, just keep the ball and pick up a first down and get your bell rung, and maybe that gets you into it. But talk about if he could have run more, and then the block passes the line of scrimmage.
Oh, Harvey, that is a all-time older head football coach take. I love it. Love it. Yeah, that'll solve your problems. Take a shot. That's awesome. I think that one thing I'm seeing with USC fans is Maiava. The mechanics aren't as good as what maybe people expected because he started playing quarterback kind of late and he didn't have a quarterback coach for a little bit. So I haven't looked at his game really specifically from the Las Vegas Bowl. I almost called it the Texas Bowl for some reason against Texas A&M. So I can't really speak to his mechanics in that game. I'd want to look more closely at it, but I understand that criticism. There are times when he throws off the back foot and when he doesn't step into throws, and he can kind of look a little crazy back there. So I do wonder if Lincoln Riley can really coach some of that stuff out of him and get those mechanics down. And if he's working with a private quarterback coach in the offseason, I'm sure that'll help too. So I do think he can improve with his mechanics, and that should help. But I can't really speak to the RPOs versus the straight dropbacks. I will say I was really impressed with the second to last touchdown pass that he made to Jacoby Lane when Lane dove for the end zone. I felt like the offensive line really protected him well, and that was the makeshift offensive line. That wasn't his first read, and he stood in there and made a great throw. So there are plays where you're like, oh, I can see it. This guy has a chance to be really, really special, and this looks like a USC quarterback. But unfortunately, on the flip side, there's some plays with him where you wonder about the mechanics, you wonder about the decision-making. The play when he got sacked and he threw the ball backwards, he was lucky that wasn't a fumble. Yeah. You might still be muted, Ryan. That was a...
Can you hear me now?
Yes, there you go. That was a bizarre play. So
yeah,
it's like I get what the earlier comment talked about when don't call him young anymore because he is in his third year of college now, going to be in his fourth next season. He's a guy where I wish there was real spring football where they would actually play games. I just feel like more reps are going to really help him, and I of course he'll get him in practice, but he looks to me like a guy who could benefit from playing in more games.
Yeah, I mean he's got some starts under his belt, but didn't start the beginning of the season. Gets to the last four, goes 3-1 in the last four games. We'll see. I thought he took some hits. There were some really bad plays like that sack throwing the ball backwards. You're like, oh my God, what are you doing there? But the run game was working. I felt like it felt like the regular season where you're like, hey, you should run the ball more. And, Shotgun would tweet, well, hey, they ran it twice in a row. Like that was a big deal. Jasper says, I like Bryan Jackson. He should have a legit shot at being RB1 next season. I agree with you there. But really the offensive line, down two starters going in, no Mason Murphy, no Jonah Monheim, and you're like, okay, well, they need Elijah Page because he's going to be your anchor. Oh, he gets hurt. He's out. So you're down three of your main starters on the offensive line. And I think, I haven't gone back and watched the line specifically, but just in general, they look pretty good. There wasn't a lot of penalties. There wasn't a lot of breakdowns. It looked like, for the most part, they opened holes in the run game. They protected Maiava pretty well. It's not going to be every play, but and I get it. It's a depleted Texas A&M defensive line, but still, they had some guys too. But I thought the offensive line did pretty well, and I thought the run game was good to the point where when Maiava's struggling, maybe run the ball more. And we know Lincoln Riley, that's not really what he does. But any thoughts on the line and the running game? I
thought the line really answered the call, or answered the bell, whatever that expression is, did really well when they were undermanned. I mean, Justin Tawanua, when he came in, I was like, okay, I feel like we would always notice at least one Mason Murphy mistake every game, and sometimes he would have multiple false starts. I didn't notice him at all in a good way. I felt like he really handled that left tackle spot, and now I'm excited to see what he can do. Maybe he pushes Tobias Raymond if USC doesn't get a transfer tackle. for the right tackle job next season. I think he certainly deserves an audition after what he did in the Las Vegas Bowl. So I was really impressed with him. Killian O'Connor, there was one play where he got pushed back noticeably, and that led to Maiava getting hit, but no funky snaps from him, no other issues. I've always thought that he was a solid player. He was someone I covered in high school at Santa Margarita. He was an All-Trinity League guy like 3 years in a row. I think he might have been the offensive lineman of the year as a senior. He's a good football player. He's just undersized. That's why he hasn't had a scholarship and didn't get one out of high school to some premier programs. I think he's a fantastic backup center and a guy who could potentially play. And if he is the starter, like you don't feel too worried about him. I wonder if he's a guy who would be a starting center for like a college football playoff caliber team, but I don't want to limit him. I think he is a good player. So I was impressed with him. The guards, always impressed with them. Alani Noah and Emmanuel Pregnon were solid. And then at right tackle, I thought Tobias Raymond did a nice job too. So I loved what I saw from the offensive line. I love what I saw from Bryan Jackson. And I don't know if he's going to be the starting running back next year. I don't think you bring in a 1,000-yard rusher to not start, but as a second-year sophomore, he could certainly be a number 2 guy, and you hope that he would be used more than Quentin Joyner was in the number 2 role. He showed, I think, that he can be a solid number 2 option. I'm a little more wary of saying he's 100% a great running back and he's going to go and do all these things. I like what I saw from him in the bowl game. A&M was undermanned, but I'm a little bit concerned with what I said after the Miller-Moss game last year. I was like, okay, he's going to come in and be great and do all this stuff.
Yeah.
We can't have too many firm takeaways from a guy who hasn't played a whole lot. Whereas with these offensive linemen, like I want them to get chances to show themselves in camp, and I think Jackson deserves to show himself in camp and get that chance to lock down the number 2 running back spot. But people who are saying, oh, he's for sure maybe the starter next year, the number 2 guy, I think he still has a little bit of a ways to go, but not in a bad way. I just think in one start he looked good, but I need to see more from him.
For sure, yeah. And I mean, that aspect of it, knowing that you're down your top 2 running backs, end up being 3 offensive linemen, 3 of your top 5 wide receivers, and the offense still, and the quarterback's playing pretty bad. You still scored 35 points. It's kind of crazy, like how that all worked out. Yeah.
What a weird game, because they had like 7 at the end of the third quarter. Like it was snap of the finger to get to 35 points. And I think Maiava started 6 of 19, and then I believe he finished 16 of 20 with 2 or 3 touchdowns and 1 pick. But he was 6 of 19, and it was terrible. Like that's what concerns me with him a little bit. Like when he gets hot, but when he's cold, he's cold.
It was cold.
The variance with him, we got to bring that floor a little bit higher, because when he's bad, other teams will be able to make him pay. But then you see the upside, and it's like, okay, like maybe this is a real guy who has a chance to do some special things under Lincoln Riley. So it's a huge offseason for him.
Yeah, high ceiling, low floor is what we've seen so far.
Big time.
We got Chad got a Facebook comment, so I wanted to read the beginning part because I want to talk about the wide receivers too.
Yeah.
He also had a quarterback question at the end we'll get to, but he says some positives with Lane, Lemon, and Jackson. Yeah, so I mean Jacoby Lane, Mekhi Lemon, they looked great out there. And he said the D and maybe the offensive line, if we consider Texas A&M second string, defensive line. He's concerned about the quarterback spot. Do you think that Longstreet's going to start game 1 or wait till they lose 2 or 3 games next year? So we may do that first, and then we can talk about the wide receivers a bit.
Well, I think Longstreet will have a chance to start, but I would be surprised. Just look at the NFL draft quarterbacks. Like Bryce Young sat his first year. Caleb Williams played his first year, but he didn't start the season as the starter. So many guys who've been drafted recently, they just sat out that first season. It's really hard to come in and be the guy right away. C.J. Stroud, I think, sat his first season. Bo Nix, he was Auburn starter his first year, but it took him a little bit to get going. So it's not a perfect thing to say if you start your first year, you're not going to be good. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say the NFL starters, the guys who've been drafted recently, more often than not, they've sat that first year. That seems to be the better path to success, where you learn that first year. Maybe you go in later in the year like Caleb Williams did, but to begin the season as QB1 when you have an established quarterback in front of you, it's really hard for a guy making the jump from high school, no matter how talented they are, to come in and be that starter right away. So I don't rule that out, but I do think that would be a surprise if Hassan Longstreet was the starter for that first game of the season next year. He'll have a chance, and I think he'll be used next season for sure eventually, but I don't think he'll come in and be the guy right away.
I agree with you there. And then also, I see Neil says smash the like button. Yes, please do. I just looked over. I didn't know how many people we had on YouTube. We had like 200 people on there. I thought it was going to be like a chill show, but glad people are coming out and tuning in. And if you're on Facebook as well, thank you for doing that, watching live. And, you can get this in podcast form afterwards or watch the replays. But it's great to have you guys on live and we can get your comments and you can correct us if we do something wrong or whatever. So we love that stuff. But I did want to talk about the wide receiver rotation. Yeah. And it's funny, David Woods mentioned this before we were previewing the game, that sometimes you just shorten that bench a little bit and you change the rotation and it actually works out better. I know like guys like, Jacoby Lane wanted to get more reps. I'm not sure. Makai's pretty kind of a quiet guy, but I'm sure he'd like to get, more reps. Well, they did. They end up starting Lane and Lemon along with Kyle Ford, and they got a ton of reps and they had a lot of production. Lane gets 3 touchdowns in the game, which is pretty impressive. The receiving wise, so Lane had 7 catches, 127 yards, 3 tugs. Makai Lemon 6 catches for 99 yards. And then Kyle Ford had 6 catches as well, 59 yards with that game-winning touchdown, but made a lot of big plays. And losing Branch and Deuce Robinson and Kyron Hudson, it didn't seem to hurt that much. I don't know. What did you think about that?
I thought that with the most opportunities they've had all year, Jacoby Lane and Kyle Ford had their best games of the season, and that wasn't a coincidence. It made me wonder why those guys weren't playing more. And with Ford, I think Kyron Hudson could have pushed him or other guys could have pushed him, but like Lane and Lemon, there was no reason that they were deserved to be rotating as much as they should. Now with Lane, maybe was there some off the field stuff when Miller Moss gets benched? He has some tweets. Did that lead to him maybe not playing as much as he probably should have? I think that's a part of it. But looking forward to next season, I do think Lincoln Riley and Dennis Simmons, they tried to make everyone happy this year, and where did it get them? 3 out of the top 5 receivers left. So I'm sure that they learned something from that, and I think that they'll shorten things up, and they might have to, because you look at next season, Lemon's back, Lane's back, and then who else do you have? You have Jaden Richardson, but he doesn't have a big role. You have Jay Fair, but he doesn't have a big role. DJ Jordan, he doesn't have a big role. And then you bring in the freshman. It's going to be Lane, Lemon. Maybe they get a portal guy. They're going to have to get someone. I imagine they'll try to get their number 3 receiver through the portal. I'd like to see them roll with 3 guys, maybe 4, pretty exclusively, and hopefully it will lead to results like we saw against Texas A&M. I will say, Ryan, seeing them tighten up the rotations, I would have loved to have seen Deuce Robinson in a tighter rotation. And if he's that number 3 receiver next year and Lane and Lemon are back and Deuce is pretty clearly that third guy behind those 2 but is playing a lot, I think he makes your offense a lot more dangerous. And he wasn't perfect this year, so that was another thought I had where I'm so excited about Jacoby Lane. I'm excited about Makai Lemon. Those guys are awesome, and if they are on the field, good things can happen. They don't have a number 3 heading into next season, and I really wish they could have done something to hang on to Deuce Robinson, because I think he could have been a perfect number 3 for that offense next year.
Yeah, not as worried about receivers, but, and I like Deuce.
No, but now one guy gets hurt, and at least when you have depth, it didn't work this year, but you could overcome some injuries. If Lane or Lemon goes down next season, assuming that they don't add a stud receiver from the portal, they could be in some trouble.
Yeah, it's good. He just never played up to, we saw Lane had games, Lemon had games. I think there was a Deuce Robinson game. There was one, right, that he had a couple touchdowns or something like that. But
he just didn't play a lot. I'll pull up his snap counts here. He was. I understand why he left. I think he thought, yes, he didn't look good he didn't look great when he was given opportunities. But as a 5-star guy, I think he thought, I should probably be playing a little more. And I know Lemon and Lane probably thought that too, because who wouldn't? But continue. I cut you off.
Yeah, well, that's okay. Danny on Facebook said, Fair had not been bad at the other wide receiver spot. Yeah, they brought in those guys too that didn't really do anything. So I feel like they can, find another receiver if you got those 2 as your studs. But I just didn't see Deuce Robinson have the kind of, he didn't play like he was 6'6" and catching the ball away from his body enough. There just wasn't enough of that. So he has the potential to get there. You never want to lose a 5-star, but I wouldn't want to you see lose Lane and Lemon.
No, of course.
Yeah.
Locking those two guys down, it was by far the most important thing. It's a nitpick that I have. I just wish like they had that star-studded 2023 class, and Zachariah Branch, he for whatever reason didn't live up to the hype nearly as much as anyone thought. But like I still am a Deuce Robinson believer, and he played 36 offensive snaps against Wisconsin, and that was the most he played all year. I think Jacoby Lane had 69 the other night. So Robinson, I understand why he's like, hey, I need to get the ball more, even if we don't think that he necessarily played well enough to get the ball. But he brings that dimension. Like, yes, he didn't play like he was 6'6" sometimes, but he's a great deep threat. And if he's your number 3 guy, I'd be happy. So let's see who their number 3 receiver is. Again, I find myself sometimes criticizing the team when they still have options. And, of course, they need to bring in at least one transfer receiver here. So they still have some moves ahead of them. If Deuce was that third guy, though, then I'd feel a lot better, I think.
Yeah. Well, let's go to the defensive side of the ball a little bit. Texas A&M almost had 450 yards, pretty close to that, but the defense came up with some big stops. Early on, it looked like Texas A&M was moving the ball well. 16-play touchdown drive to start the game where they were converted on a 4th down. Get another drive starting. USC gets that interception. Another drive that looks like it's going to be a touchdown. I think they got 67 yards on that drive. The sort of fortunate interception in the end zone. Kamari Ramsey made a really nice play on that interception. The other one was kind of lucky where it hits the receiver in the head, right? That was his helmet or whatever. But then, get a couple 3-and-outs going into the half. So give USC a chance. And then I think the second half started the same way. Like Texas A&M was moving the ball, touchdown, field goal, touchdown, and then a couple 3-and-outs again, which was really important to give USC a chance. A short field because of a Jayden Maiava interception, and USC forces a field goal attempt, and they end up missing it. Giving up that late touchdown where Texas A&M takes the lead again after USC briefly took the lead. That's fine, but whatever, it's going to happen. I thought overall there were some, drives where they just gave up chunk plays, and Texas A&M was moving the ball really well. Reed, I thought, he's a redshirt freshman for Texas A&M. He looked pretty accurate to me. They had him throw it a lot. He was, active. He could take off and run. But for the most part, USC's defense sort of bent but didn't break and came up with the plays they needed to make on some, critical drives where they needed to get stops, to get 4 3-and-outs in the game and not give up points on a short field after an interception. I thought overall the defense played pretty well, especially considering that the offense would put them in bad spots more often than not.
It was another classic D'Anton Lynn game where you leave the game thinking, man, if they could just get him some NFL talent on defense, some dudes, the sky's the limit for that unit. One of the touchdowns they gave up came after that Maiava interception that was batted up in the air that I think started at the 8 or 9 yard line.
Yeah,
so it's tough to penalize them for that. So you take that touchdown off. They allowed 24 points. That's pretty solid, and they did get some really key stops in the second half. So I was very impressed with USC's defense. I thought Prophet Brown had some nice moments at nickelback and at safety. Cameron Fountain blew up a run. Braylon Shelby had a sack. You got what you've been getting all year from guys in the middle, Nate Clifton and Gavin Meyer, Kobe Pepe. He had a tackle on one of the plays. So your plus players like Kamari Ramsey and Eric Gentry, they showed up and they did really well. I leave that game thinking if USC has a few more plus players on that side of the ball with D'Anton Lynn calling the plays and Eric Henderson, the rest of that defensive staff doing what they're doing, they have a chance to be pretty special. So were they perfect? Of course not, but giving up 24 points, I take one touchdown off the board because they had that really short field. Pretty solid. Yeah. I mean, in the first half, they gave up the one touchdown on the first drive, like you said, and then that was it. And then in the second half, they made plays when they needed to make plays. So I left again thinking that I'm feeling good about that unit going forward, and if they can add some talent, sky's the limit.
Yeah, and we had a comment about them being very good on third downs. They were. Only one fourth down given up. USC's been pretty bad at that. Texas A&M was 1 for 1 in that opening touchdown drive, but a couple opportunities. They had a 4th and 1 near midfield. Texas A&M ended up punting, but USC's been good on third down. What were their third down numbers for this one? Well, actually, yeah, Texas A&M was pretty good, 7 of 15. That's below average for USC, but in general, USC's been very good on third down defenses. But they and this was the game they sort of came up with the key plays when they needed to. The 3 and outs that they forced, get 4 of them. I think that's pretty good, especially late in the game when you're in a big hole and you need you have to have the defense get a stop to give a chance to come back, because the offense wasn't playing very well. But then the offense starts clicking, and I think the defense fed off it a little bit and we're able to get the stop. Sometimes you see that where the offense finally gets going, but then the defense gives up the score too. So they needed to kind of everything to work together towards the end of the game, and it happened. And that the defense got stops and USC scored. And even after that, the interception late in the game, because USC scored touchdowns on 4 of the last 5 drives. The other one was an interception, but USC, I think the defense did a pretty nice job considering everything that they were asked to do.
Yeah, we talked so much about Maiava, the highs being so high, the lows being so low. The USC defense is pretty even-keeled, which is good. You don't want to be making too many mistakes, of course. So, yeah, I'm with you on that. They made some key stops. And then on one of the touchdowns, one of A&M's receivers just ran a great route against Bryson Shaw. He's a guy that hopefully next season maybe you have a little bit of a better secondary. You're not relying on him as much. There was a miscommunication on their first touchdown where Shaw and Achille Arnold weren't on the same page. So if they can tighten up some things in the secondary, get some guys back there, you got to feel pretty good about them. Let's see what they do here in the portal the rest of the way.
If I remember, even that first touchdown, I forget who was in coverage. But if I'm not, I think it was like really good coverage too, and it just was a great catch. Like,
I think you're remembering the DeCarlos Nicholson. Is that what you're thinking of? That wasn't a touchdown. Because the first touchdown, there was a breakdown. One of them, Jacoby Covington, was in coverage. And he got
Nicholson made it.
Pass
Yeah.
interference. Nicholson had the great coverage on a play down the field that Reed just made a great throw, and the guy made a great catch. There wasn't really much he could do. I thought DeCarlos Nicholson, like, we talk about a guy who might come back next year if the junior college ruling goes in his favor, which it looks like it should. Like, he's someone who I thought had a really good audition for next season. John Humphrey, who's out of eligibility, I didn't really think he played too well, but Nicholson has a chance to come back, and I like what I saw from him against Texas A&M.
Yeah. All right. Well, good stuff. Get the win, 7-6. All that. I mean, you get to see some young guys. I mean, we got a lot of offseason to sort of talk about the future. We've sort of talked about the quarterback future a little bit.
That's going to be the big story.
Yeah, the portal is closed. That doesn't mean players can't transfer. It just means you can't enter the portal. We might still see some players that put the paperwork in or whatever.
And USC can still have players enter the portal until January 1st, I think. 5 days or however many days it is until after the bowl game. For whatever reason, the rule is 5 days after your bowl game you can enter. So,
okay, interesting.
Not totally out of the woods yet, but I don't foresee any major additions. So I guess we'll see. You can never say never, but I think if anyone was going to jump in, they probably would have by now.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. And if there's a coaching change, there's a 30-day window that opens up. But
are you saying there's going to be a coaching change?
No. But the portal's shutting down eventually. But just as far as new entries go, there'll be another one in the spring. But just, I think in general, we both feel that USC did a decent job for the recruiting class, but ranked 13th. You wanted to see kind of a top 10-ish sort of class, especially coming off 2 bad seasons in a row. And then, they did get a couple 5-star players and stuff. And the portal, some good additions, a couple of defensive linemen, running back, DB, but, kicker, punter, stuff you needed. But I thought this would be a bigger swing at the portal. There's still opportunities with the spring, and there's still guys going to be in the portal that USC could get out of there. But it's not been exactly what I was looking for. But I mean, it's not terrible, but it's not like, I think you needed to try to hit a home run here, and this was like a long double or something. But I don't know, what are your thoughts of where, compared to the players USC lost in the portal, rebuilding the roster, where the Trojans are at now?
Well, I just think they could have planned better. Like, Jonah Monheim is gone. You need a center. Killian O'Connor is a walk-on, and if season started tomorrow, he'd be your starting center. Like, I think he's good, like I said earlier, but ideally you bring someone else in. So you would hope that they would target people and they'd put a full court press on a center, and they'd have one by now. They'd have their starting center for next season, but now that's a question mark. I know they don't have a linebacker coach, but you look at the number of defensive snaps played. Easton Mascarenas-Arnold played 789 defensive snaps. Mason Cobb played 714 defensive snaps this season for USC. Those were the first and the second most defensive snaps, respectively. And they don't have a linebacker from the portal to help come fill some of that. So I don't totally understand the strategy. They wanted to beef up in the middle. They've done that. So credit to them for that. They needed a running back. They did that. But it's a roster that went 6-6 and needed an infusion of talent. And yes, it's the portal. You're not going to get every, NFL draft caliber guy isn't going to be in the portal you can just take, but they needed more help than what they've done so far. And I think the biggest surprise to me is they could have planned better where you're losing your center. Let's target a center. Let's get a center in here as quick as possible. You're losing your 2 starting linebackers. Let's go in, get a linebacker, someone who can help with the young guys, play with Eric Gentry. And maybe when they get a linebacker coach, he'll bring someone over with him potentially. But you look at the transfer portal linebackers, slim pickings right now. A lot of the top linebackers, and there weren't even that many top linebackers to begin with, are already on different teams. Achille Arnold was the 3rd most snap defensive player with 697. What have they done to address his departure? So I just have questions in that regard, Ryan, where it was you knew these guys were gone. You knew you needed to bring someone in to help fill that void. You can rely on some younger players to help with that, but I don't think there are any studs necessarily waiting in the wings. So it's okay, last season, you're losing your left tackle, Elijah Page, that's your left tackle.
Yes.
Who's that at linebacker? I don't think you can say that for sure about Desmond Stevens right now. Who's that at center? You don't have one. So that, to me, is baffling. I want USC to do everything it possibly can to put itself in a position to succeed for next year, go out and make the college football playoff. And let's be honest, they haven't done that. They still have pretty big holes on this roster going forward to next season. And a lot of the top guys have already signed elsewhere, so it's frustrating.
No, I agree with you. It's one of those things where you had to act fast, and you wanted to see USC, come out of the gate quickly. They did some good things on the defensive line. It's that they definitely needed to address that. But linebacker, offensive lineman, what you could do
secondary,
there.
And they got burned by Chase and Johnson. So that's
they had one guy
blow.
committed and he switched.
Yeah,
but what did I'm sure there's some self-inflicted wounds in that.
And they have young guys who are going to come in and help. But I don't think and they're not done for sure. But if they only add a few other guys here, those holes on that roster, is this a college football playoff team, or is this a team where maybe the best case scenario is they go 9-3, it's a good season, you're going in the right direction? The way the transfer portal works in college football is right now, and your USC, you have money, you can transform a roster with a snap of the finger to put yourself in a position to be in the playoff. To me, Ryan, they're treating this right now okay, we needed help on the defensive line, and if we fix that, then boom, that's all we needed help with. We're 1 or 2 players away from being in this position where we're going to be at the top of the Big Ten, have a chance to make the college football playoff, where realistically they're 6-6, and while they were close in a bunch of games, they need help all over the roster to get to the promised land, and I just don't think that they've had that urgency. It's not like they're not going after guys, they are, but I don't know, the full court press, the recruiting tactics, for whatever reason, the results haven't been there.
No, I think the urgency, you're right about that. You need to be hey, I'm a male high school student in Alaska, and it's prom season. There's 100 guys in my class and 7 girls. You got to ask fast. If you wait, I'm going to wait around, they're going to be gone. And a lot of people have been asked to the prom already, and you needed to hit it right away, with super urgency, and USC didn't really do that. And maybe you can address some of these guys in the portal. You never know what's going on, but I wanted to see that sense of urgency. I want to see them recruit Mater Dei and St. John Bosco in Southern California like a bat out of hell, just go crazy. And they haven't been doing that. They've sort of been doing the bare minimum, if it feels like. And maybe that's getting better, and they got to try to do a better job of that. But I felt in the portal, you needed to do the same thing, and it just wasn't. It was sort of we're pretty good where we are now. It's no, you need to get a lot better, and go be the portal king. Go fight against Lane Kiffin for all these guys like you did that first year. They got away from that a little bit, and I think they needed to get better. After going 6-6 in the regular season, you had to hit it hard. And they did okay, but they needed better than okay.
It's still not done too, so we
right.
We don't want to say for sure it's been this big fail. They have to get a linebacker, they have to get a receiver, so they're gonna make some moves here. Still, it's funny, Ryan, we did that show where I sort of went off a little bit and you were frustrated too. And then boom, they signed, or I don't know if signed, it's tough to keep it all straight, but they got a commitment from Keyshawn Silver and the Jamal Jarrett from Georgia.
Jarrett, yeah.
So the two defensive linemen, and Eli Sanders committed right after or during the show. So right after we did that, they got 3 guys and it was like, okay, here we go. But then that was it. Like, I thought the floodgates were going to open and they were going to bring in some more guys. And I was like, oh, how do you like what they're doing in the portal now? They added these guys. Yeah. Well, that was it. Like,
it sort of dried up. Yeah.
Like the whole point that we were making was they needed to do more and they did a little more and everyone was taking a victory lap and like, we got to see more. So it's frustrating. And I don't know. I just want them to be in the best possible position to succeed, and they have some holes on the roster, so we'll see.
Yeah, and I think having a general manager will help all of that, and hopefully USC will have somebody in that position soon, but you would have loved it to be sometime before this portal window because I think that would have helped as well. But why don't we do this? Let's take a break. I have a couple emails because we're kind of mixing Tunnel Vision and the Peristyle podcast. And I did star a bunch of questions in the chat. We have people live and active on YouTube and Facebook, so that's cool. If you have any more questions, you can put them in the chat, and we will do our best to get to it. So we're going to take a quick break, unless you're watching live, and it's a very short break. But back in a minute, everyone. Alrighty, we're back here on the Peristyle podcast and television, whatever you want to call it today, because we're just kind of doing an end of the season, end of the bowl game recap of what's been going on. Got like some emails, like I said, so we'll go do some of those and we'll do some questions from the live chat. And if you have another one, you can just put it in there. Put a question in the front and I will get to it. Why don't we start with Dave Connor? He says, I appreciate your recent reporting and commentary on the state of the football program. I particularly appreciate Connor's passion. It shows that he is truly concerned. Would you agree that a major lesson to be learned here is about accountability? There are 2 forms of accountability, a personal one that comes from yourself. Am I doing a good job? And one that comes from the institution or organization. Is my colleague doing a good job? I see Lincoln Riley holding players accountable, but I don't see him holding himself accountable personally in any meaningful way beyond some platitude statements. This kind of double standard is a morale killer. Also, Lincoln Riley's mega buyout, given that there's little institutional organizational accountability that can be brought to bear. Should the head football coach be accountable, and if so, to whom? Thanks for your work, Dave.
The head coach should be accountable to probably the athletic director, but it's, as we've been over many times, challenging when the head coach makes as much money as he does and the athletic director didn't hire him, so that accountability sort of fades a little bit. We were talking off the air, Ryan. For USC, there really isn't any excuse for them not to be like a well-oiled machine when it comes to recruiting.
Yes.
So I think
it's year 3.
I think with Lincoln Riley, I felt like offensively, yes, should they have run the ball more? Was it perfect this year? He has some stuff to learn. I feel like he does evolve and he does learn from some stuff on offense. And he is getting more up to speed with the NIL stuff. But when I see that email, listen to what you said, listen to what the emailer said, like, who's holding him accountable for some of what's going on with the roster building and some of what's going on with the recruiting stuff? That sort of is where I go with that, because I do think he's changed offensively, and he changed the quarterback. Defensive coaching staff's all new, like he's shown. He can change with some X's and O stuff, of course, but with the roster building, with the transfer portal slow start here, with just needing to have a bigger sense of urgency, in my opinion, I don't really know who's holding him accountable with that, and I'm sure Jen Cohen and the administration is trying, but that's why the general manager is so important, not because it's someone who can put him in his place, so to speak, just so it's another person who understands contracts and understands the money piece and understands what it takes to build a really good roster. Because let's be honest, did USC have a really good roster this year? No. Lincoln Riley said in his first year, this is the worst roster we're ever going to have. That was probably the best roster that
it probably was,
they've had. So what does that tell you? It tells you he's not navigating this new era of college football very well. Who's holding him accountable, from a roster building perspective? I don't really know. So let's get this general manager in here. And one last thing, when they do hire a general manager, I expect it to be next month. I don't think that will just like everything's fixed. I think we fall into that trap where USC does something and it's just like, okay, it's all good right now. Let's see how it plays out. And it certainly should help, but I think would be foolish to say, okay, they hired this person and it's all going to just be fixed now. Did we learn our lesson from the new defensive staff? I think a lot of people, myself included, thought, okay, new defensive staff, things are going to be fixed, and then the record gets worse. So, like, they can take steps to improve, but we still have to see it play out. I think making a prediction based on someone who's hired off the field, like a coach or a general manager, like you can get in really good players, and then I'd feel better about making a prediction. If they make a coaching change, if they make a general manager change, that should help, and Lincoln Riley should be held more accountable by that person. But like, we need to see how it plays out, because as we've seen so many times, you think something's going to happen, and then the opposite does.
Yeah, no, I agree with all that. I think for accountability, yes, like was Nick Saban accountable to the athletic director, whoever it was at Alabama? No, like he was just his own thing. Coaches can be like the top of the totem pole, but in theory, you do report to the athletic director, and they report to the president of the university, and the president has the board of trustees. There's still a hierarchy and accountability there. The problem being in this case, like Connor mentioned, that there's not a lot of just opportunities for the athletic director to hold the head coach accountable if you can't even threaten to fire them, because their contract is so big. And she didn't sign him to that contract. It was Mike Bone. And it's, you signed that big of a contract assuming everything's going to be great. The problem is if it's not great, and it hasn't been great, they've been bad for 2 years. Now what do? You're on the hook for $90 million if you wanted to get rid of them. So that's tougher to do. But when it's not like if you hire a general manager, Lincoln Riley would be reporting to that person, but it would be another voice in the room that does have authority, that has football knowledge, that would be someone that you could kind of, not necessarily contrarian, but it would be a different viewpoint. I feel like Lincoln Riley has a bunch of people around him that are Lincoln Riley people, and they're not going to be like yelling at him to do something different, where you bring in a good general manager and there's going to be a different viewpoint, and there could be argument about which way we go and how things are done. So I think that's important too. Even if he's not reporting to somebody, it's an important voice in the room.
Absolutely. And Ryan, we've heard and seen USC look at guys in the portal and make offers to them in the portal, and then turn around and the player goes somewhere else. Like, I don't think they're doing a very good job of navigating the current NIL landscape of things. And so that's why, for my whole rant before about, they bring in someone, it's not magically going to be fixed. It has to help, because it would be one thing if they weren't recruiting a bunch of guys from the portal and would say, why aren't you recruiting them? But they are. They're just not landing a lot of these guys.
Yeah. All right. We got a question in the chat from Serb. When do we expect USC to hire a linebacker coach?
I expect it any day now, as soon as possible, unless it's someone who's on a staff in the playoff. But that really doesn't make sense. Why would a linebacker coach at one of those programs leave to be a linebacker coach here? It would have to be someone who's lower on the totem pole, and then you could just announce it, and they would just join them whenever that team's run is over. So maybe it's someone who's still in the NFL. I don't know. All I do know is it's obvious that is not helping recruiting right now, and they need someone who they can add who is appealing and attractive to guys in the portal. Like, am I crazy? They desperately need a linebacker. You can't.
I think so. Yeah.
Rely on Eric Gentry and Desmond Stevens. For as much as I love Eric Gentry, I love him as much as the next guy. He's one concussion away from maybe never playing football again.
Yeah.
I don't think you can go in and say he's our starting linebacker. He's going to be the biggest piece of what we do. Hopefully he is, but I'm just a little scared of him because he hasn't been as available, even though his upside is so high. So I expect it to be soon, but I don't know why it hasn't come sooner, because I think pretty clearly that hasn't helped them not having a linebacker coach in place.
Jasper says, what injury did Elijah Page suffer the first quarter? I hope it wasn't serious. We haven't heard.
I think left ankle, according to the ESPN broadcaster.
Okay.
And he had the left cleat off, and it didn't look like it was a knee. So hopefully he just tweaked an ankle. And I think the good news is, unless he needs some crazy surgery, which I haven't heard anything about that, he should be totally good to go if it's just an ankle in a few weeks, hopefully. So that's good.
All right. Let's see. We got a text. I don't know if they signed it, but it says, just saw Tunnel Vision. So from our last show, Connor is such a powerful character on Tunnel Vision.
Jeez.
He's unflinchingly honest about the program and Riley's actions, which make him stand out. His willingness to speak the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, really shines through.
Who wrote this? My mom?
I know. It's not just about revealing the flaws in the system. It's about confronting things others might avoid. How do you feel about his honesty? And so this was to me. And then he says, oh, and I just saw your take. You were good. So he's talking to me, Ryan.
Yeah.
Wish you would have called it out last year. Sosna was terrible. So I'm sorry. I don't remember who sent this text, and I don't think they signed it. But thanks. No, we always try. Like, that's what we try to do. Like, not trying to be negative, not trying to, like, say something to get clicks or whatever. We want to tell you what we think. And I thought USC was going to be really good after beating LSU. Like, all the positive things that we had heard about in the offseason, it looked like the LSU game, it came to fruition. And then they started losing games they shouldn't lose, and that wasn't the case. And as far as Brandon Sosna goes, I like Brandon a lot. That contract that, the biggest thing he did was getting Lincoln Riley, which at the time was something that we've never seen before. Like, it really, the blue blood thing wasn't a thing. And it happened twice in a couple of days, right? Where Brian Kelly goes to LSU. But the more I start hearing about the contract, the more it's like, man, you like had to sell your soul to get him. And so to the point where it's so much that you probably needed to question, like, okay, do we really need to do all of this to bring him in? Is it worth it? But I feel like the administration there was so much doom and gloom with Clay Helton, and they needed a home run wasn't going to do. They needed a grand slam, and this was their opportunity to do it. So, but now it looks like they kind of sold their soul to get Lincoln Riley, and you've had one good year and two bad ones, and that's not what you are looking for. And I'm sure if Brandon was around, and I've talked to him about that, he's like, hey, you have to see out the process and stuff. And I get, you got an opportunity. Like, there's a lot more football to be played because you're not getting rid of them anytime soon. But you want to start seeing it go in the other direction. They've gone down every year, and that's not what you want. So I think Brandon's good, and they like, even when Mike Bohn got hired, Connor, I was like, look, they've been so bad for so long. You kind of just need a good AD to come in and, like, fix some of the stupid stuff, and then you could probably get a great one after that. Like, I really had said that back then, and I think that's kind of how it's played out. But Brandon had a lot to do with a lot of good things that happened. This Riley contract, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's great if you want some wiggle room here, and USC would love some, and they don't have it right now. So anyway, that's my thoughts.
Brandon was before my time, but don't you think if he was here, they'd be doing way better with NIL?
Yeah, I think when he left and Mike Bohn was still there, Mike Bohn was not big into the NIL, so I think Brandon would have got things going in the right direction. So,
well, I think he would have just seen, like, okay, this is what it takes, and we're not doing that. Let's take steps to do that. And I think that happened a lot slower without him.
Yeah. No, yes, that's true. And then if Brandon stayed till the end of Mike Bohn's tenure, I think things would have been in better place for Jen Cohen to take over, where things started to go downhill. They neglected NIL and started getting further behind. And then they had to play a lot of catch up. And now they got a lot of money, but they're not good at spending it yet. So it's like you're growing too fast. They're like a 14-year-old kid in a growth spurt, and it's just like they're still gangly and trying to figure out what to do. Where, you're competing against guys that are 18 years old and fully grown, and USC was playing catch up in that way. I just come up with these analogies.
I love it.
Do you like this?
The Alaska prom one was hilarious.
Well, that's pretty good, right? Like, there's not a lot of women in Alaska, so like you better get your prom date early. Rich in San Diego. One last ride. Thank you to all the staff for providing the best USC content. Boss Man, that's me. CT, G Money, Triple Double, Shoddy, 5 stars only, RJ, and the Professor Jack. You guys are awesome. Let's get to, I don't know what he means. Don't get me wrong. The win was great. Happy for Jayden, Ford, Lemon, JT, Tobias, Lane, And those guys, we were in the same spot last year with Moss. Riley should not let this deter him from getting his Will Howard, the guy he went and visited last year. While Jayden made some great throws, you saw that some of the decision-making was JV-level stuff. At times, he makes predetermined throws and looks very robotic. Can't wait for the new linebackers to take over. You saw why. And then Riley still can't manage the clock. Let's not forget the delay again towards the end. Thoughts? Rich in San Diego.
Well, who's the Will Howard in the portal? I mean, just pulling up the and thank you, Rich, for the
yeah, that's
kind
really
words,
nice
for sure.
Thank
Like,
you.
I just don't think that there's a Will Howard in the portal right now who isn't already going somewhere outside of the South Dakota State guy. All these people have already picked a destination, unless you want the UNLV quarterback who quit on his team, Matthew Sluka, who I don't think anyone wants him. I mean, just going through the rankings here, like that ship has sailed. Do you want Malachi Nelson back? Like, it's slim pickings right now outside of the South Dakota State guys. So I don't know if there is a portal quarterback out there. And remember, last year the portal was after the bowl game, or it at least had opened maybe right before the bowl game started. So there were still a bunch of openings for guys to go wherever they wanted after the Holiday Bowl, whereas now the portal opened December 4th. Like, if you wanted a quarterback, you would have had to have gotten one before. And then if they get one, does Jayden probably transfer? I mean, I don't know. Like, would he play in the game? Would you have to rely on Jake Jensen and then as a walk-on? So it could have gotten really messy. And, of course, you don't just do one thing based on the bowl game. The bowl game doesn't matter. I just think, Ryan, like, they're kind of damned if they do, damned if they don't, where say someone does enter the portal tomorrow who would be an upgrade over Jayden. Like, you bring him in and then you run the risk of losing Jayden, which some people would say, oh, that's good. But I think that kind of does you a little damage. If you run off two quarterbacks in the same season, that's probably not a good thing.
No, that's probably not good. We got some weird comments in the chat, like Malachi Nelson, Jalen Milroe, like, he could potentially go in there. And there might be a stud in the spring window. We don't know. We'll see what happens. And it's going to be up to Lincoln Riley to figure out if that's what he wants to do.
Do you think that there would – I feel like for quarterback, you need to be there for spring ball. I think it's hard to come in after spring practice and only have a few months with your teammates. I think it was really important that Maiava had the spring where he told us, Ryan, remember, I sucked this spring. I wasn't good.
Yeah.
Imagine if he comes in after the spring and he sucks and wasn't good in the fall, then it's like, okay, we maybe don't have anyone here. So,
but I think he was a
unique
freshman
case.
Yeah, well, he was a freshman. Like, I think you're bringing in the sixth-year guy or whatever. Like that dude.
But what
shouldn't
sixth-year guy like isn't going to start at his school that's worth a damn? Like, who's going to lose their job in the?
No, they want to go somewhere else. They like Russell Wilson.
They have such a good spring game that like they raise their stock. I think the time for the quarterback stuff is now.
All right, we'll see. SC Neal, take it or leave it. Longstreet will be the starting quarterback before the end of 2025.
If they don't add any starter level guy, if they do what I think they're going to do, bring in like a third string Jake Jensen type, I'm going to take it. I think Hassan Longstreet will take over at some point next season, and maybe it's not necessarily due to performance. Maybe Jayden gets hurt. I hope that doesn't happen. I'm not saying he's going to fail. I'm just saying I think Longstreet has a chance to be the starter, and we'll see.
I'm going to leave it. I don't think he's going to end up being the starter, but we'll see. Kevin had a question on YouTube. What are your thoughts on the offensive line's performance? I noticed less mental mistakes compared to when Henson was the offensive line coach. I don't know if that's a correlation I would make, but I was impressed with the offensive line play.
I was impressed too. I have a hard time saying, oh, Zach Hansen's been here for 2 weeks coaching these guys, and that's the reason they were good. Doesn't Henson, who coached them the whole year to prepare them for this, deserve more of the credit? So I was impressed with him, but I don't think it's like Zach Hansen has a magic wand and now those guys were better. I think Henson probably deserves more of the credit than he's getting.
Yeah, no, I agree. I thought he did they were bad to start the season. They got a lot better. So I wouldn't attribute that to him. Jeff had a question, and this is like before your time, Connor. Hey, Ryan, I'm 99.9% certain Kyle Ford's first catch was a garbage time TD under Helton.
I think it was. I got a text from someone that said it was, so I don't know if they're right, but that's two people saying that. I think that's true.
So I know I have a story Chris Trevino wrote in 2019. USC freshman receiver Kyle Ford, first TD catch of his career in the Oregon loss.
Yeah.
So he caught, I don't know if that was his first catch. Let me see.
Oh, this guy's saying first ever catch.
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
He says, so Ford's quote was, "It felt some weight was lifted off my shoulders a little bit. It was really nice, but I also wish we got the win. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way." Let's see. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if that was his first catch or not, but that was back when like Drake London was on the team, who's on the TV right now. But sorry if someone could. I don't know if that was the first catch, but that was his first TD catch was an Oregon loss. So I don't know if that was garbage time or not. Fat Bank is saying, can someone explain the delay of game? And then someone else had the another question kind of along those lines. Let's see. I'll pull it up there. But anyway, yeah.
Riley explained it. They had a substitution mistake, and someone came out late. And by rule, you have to give the defense a chance to sub. And that had happened earlier in the game. I remember, Ryan, watching Lincoln Riley's body language when that happened, and he was so fine with taking the 5-yard penalty. He acknowledged their mistake after the game. Like, that's when I thought, okay. I mean, it looked like they were going to score for sure, no matter what. But
yeah, they were at the 2. You'd rather be at the 2 than the 7. You know.
Yes, but like sometimes you'd rather have that space. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, because Riley doesn't like to run the ball. Yeah, Danny said, did he purposely take the delay of game penalty at the end?
No, he didn't purposely take
Yes.
it, but he purposely took it over using a timeout.
Yeah, it was sort of like they only had 10 guys. He admitted like they screwed up. Like that's a bad screw up. You shouldn't be screwing that up for a potential game-winning score. But they did. They only had 10 dudes out there. They didn't want to run a play with 10, so they were going to substitute. But then when they did, it allowed Texas A&M to do it. So he was like, if they substitute, then we're screwed. We'll just take the delay of game. And they did, so that's what he ended up doing, and it worked out. But yes, that was a mess up that ended up working out okay because Kyle Ford got to score. So Fat Bank, thank you for that one. Let's go to Danny's in there again. Let me pull up his question. It's good to get some Facebook questions in here. I like it. SC will need some new linebackers, even with Gentry returning. Wish Davis had stayed.
I think that ship had sailed. I believe they told Rajon that at his size that he wasn't going to play.
It wasn't going to work.
So
yeah.
I think they kind of forced his hand on that. So do we wish that he stayed? Hasn't like if he was going to do something, it would have happened by now. I think.
The fact that he's modern day and it was a 4-star, everyone was, but it just there was a lot of opportunities there for something to happen. It just didn't. Speaking of linebackers, Jasper, who will be the starting linebacker heading into the spring? Top of my head, only Gentry and Stevens come to mind.
Yeah, those two guys, and then behind them. I thought Elijah Newby would maybe be in the mix, but he was practicing and warming up with the edge rushers in the bowl game, so maybe it was that
he could be by the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think he'll be a linebacker, but that was surprising. So he's in the mix. Garrison Madden might be in the mix if he can come back. I'd have to look at his eligibility. I think he can come back, but I wouldn't really rely on him. He's more of a core special teams guy. They brought in a true freshman from St. Clemente, Matai Tagowai. I always say his name wrong. I need to ask Chris or Shotgun how to pronounce his name. He's a little undersized, so I don't think he can come in right away and be a linebacker. So it's Gentry and Stevens if the season started tomorrow. But again, they need to bring in a transfer portal linebacker, and they needed to yesterday.
Steven in Poway. Dear Ryan and Triple Double, congratulations to the offensive line for a heroic effort, particularly under the circumstances. Congratulations to the coaching staff for getting the most out of the players that actually played in the Las Vegas Bowl game. Congratulations to the defense for making some huge turnovers and stops, especially when it counted the most. And congratulations to Mekhi Lemon, Jacoby Lane, and Kyle Ford for making huge offensive plays. But ball security must be the number one priority of a quarterback, and Jayden Maiava now has 5 interceptions in the last 2 games of the season and several other tip balls that didn't show up in the stat sheets. I don't care what his win-loss record as a starter is or how many TDs he's thrown. USC has to go to the portal to find another number 1 QB who protects the ball and can step right in from day one while Longstreet gets up to speed. I'm sorry to say, but I've seen enough. Maiava's not the guy. Thoughts, Stephen Poway? We've talked about this a bunch, but there are definitely fans that feel that way, Connor. I know you talked about, do you want to go to the portal and have it lose another guy? But if you don't feel he's the guy, could you get a one and done or someone in the portal? Not that there's a lot of them in there. I don't know. It's going to be up to Riley, whatever Riley thinks, I guess.
If Nico Maiava or Jalen Milroe enter, then I'll feel differently, but I don't think that either one of those guys would enter. So
there's a lot of Nico talk in the chat. I haven't heard it.
There are rumors. I mean, I really wasn't that blown away by him. I mean, he of course would be an upgrade over Jayden Maiava. Just looking at the class last year, I mean, Cam Ward, Will Howard, and there was one other guy, right, who I'm forgetting, but like those were two. Like Miami and Ohio State took those guys. Like if those schools are interested, that quarterback class last year was better, is what I'm trying to say.
Yes,
this year it has not been as good. So I don't know. And if you're Tennessee and you lose your quarterback, like I feel like, or if Alabama did, like who's coming in to replace those guys? I don't know if they really have natural guys behind them. So I think they got to do whatever it takes to get those guys to stick around.
I think like Milroe probably works better in Riley's system than he does in Kalen DeBoer's. That's probably would be the reason if he did.
Yeah, and Alabama does have that young quarterback, but I mean, I don't know what's his name, Austin something from Folsom. Is he?
Yeah, Quinn Ewers, like Quinn Ewers could enter.
Yeah, I could. I mean, he'd go to Oregon, wouldn't he? That doesn't that just seem like the natural?
I don't know.
For him? Dylan Gabriel was the other guy. Speaking.
Yeah,
of
Dylan Gabriel. Yeah. We got a few more, and we'll let you guys go. Swayze, why in CF don't you often see a two-back set? One blocks, and the defense doesn't know which one will get the ball.
I'm not sure. I know they don't use a fullback. Lincoln Riley doesn't. Not too many college teams don't, just because they're out of the shotgun so much.
If there's two, if it's a 12 personnel, like you're using two tight ends would be the thing, but just a lot of receivers. It's just like a heavy dose of that. Like keeping the trend is to be spread out more, and more guys in the backfield is not spreading out more. So that would be my guess, but I'm not like some expert there. Carlos from Facebook, what do y'all think about Mike Matthews? I saw Walker Matthews quote tweet an eyes emoji on his transfer portal announcement.
I'd be over the moon if they got him, a 5-star receiver who took an official visit to USC last year, USC was in his top 5 or maybe even top 3, I think. Like, that's a guy I'd try to go get if he's your number 3 receiver next year. Yes, he's unproven. He didn't do a lot at Tennessee, but get him in the room. I mean, they need bodies. Why not get an X5 star? I'd be really happy with him.
Yeah, no, that sounds like it would be good. And then Tony had a couple questions. Let me pull up his first one. Second one's kind of dumb, but I'll say just kidding. Do you both believe that Coach Riley is building the team's foundation in the right direction, regardless if Riley gathers talent and reaps the benefits of a powerhouse? Do you believe either Riley or the next coach can build off the talent on what Riley has so far put together? Coach Carroll had pieces of talent from the previous coach, but was a CEO at USC.
So the record's going in the wrong direction, but it's pretty clear that they are going out of their way to really emphasize the trenches, at least defensively. On the offensive line, I don't really know what's going on with that transfer portal recruiting, but they did bring back Emmanuel Pregnon, which is huge. Elijah Page will be back. Alani Noah will be back. That's 3 out of 5 pieces for an offensive line that ended the year pretty well. They added the 2 defensive tackles from the portal. They have some good young edge rusher talent. They have some other guys in the middle of that defense. Jakeem Stewart's coming in. So foundationally, is Riley moving in the right direction, trying to build in the trenches in the Big Ten Conference? I think you have to say yes. There's a bunch of other stuff that goes into building the right foundation, but I do think that they're prioritizing the trenches. They saw this year that that's what they need to do to get better. So to answer the question, I do think so, but there's still a lot else that needs to go into this before I can say like they're in a really good spot.
Yeah, and if a new coach was coming in, you're probably losing any foundation you built.
Yeah.
Like, so that's like
it's different now.
You can't look at it. It's not a video game. You're building up to, like, what did Kirk Cignetti do at Indiana? Like they were 3-9 and they win 11 games. Like it's you're not building up for long term if you're switching coaches. You're making a lot of changes if you're switching coaches. Dale says Lincoln Riley needs to hire an intern to sit next to him for clock management purposes. He sucks at clock management. I mean, I don't disagree. Like, I think coaches in general suck at clock management, and they're doing so much. And with Lincoln Riley doing the play calling and stuff, I don't think there's like a clock management specialist near him, but I think that would be. I thought it was so dumb the way the end of the first half went, and to see them just sort of let time run off so Texas A&M wouldn't get the ball. I wanted you to try to score. You're 6-6 in the Las Vegas Bowl. Go try to score a touch. You're lucky to be tied because A&M moved the ball. Go try to score a touchdown, and they got close and they sort of just sat on it, and I didn't like it. And then they called timeout with like 30 seconds left. They should have let it run all the way down. I didn't like the way that was run. So I have no problem having a clock management specialist. I don't know how many coaches do or if it's even a thing, but I would be in favor of that. What do you
Shotgun
think?
was right that Riley played that like he didn't trust Maiava, and that was my read on it. If he had Caleb Williams back there, don't you think they are going a lot faster? But you're right, though. If it's the Las Vegas Bowl and you're 6-6, like
what are you afraid of?
Exactly. I think he was afraid of throwing another pick, maybe. But
so, like, Jesus, like 4 or 5 of them, like whatever. Like, you're to Las Vegas Bowl, you got to try to score. Like
he wanted to go into the half up 10-7, and it's another situation like the Maryland game where Miller
that was your goal to go in the half up 10-7.
No, like just to kick a field goal. His goal was to kick a field goal.
Yeah, you're satisfied with 10-7.
And they missed it.
No, yeah, like. That's what you're playing for? Like, oh, well, let's just sit on it and kick a field goal. Like,
I mean, it had been so bad.
You could
on
score.
Offense.
Yes, but you were now in the red zone or whatever. Like, go freaking score. Like, gee, that just was annoying.
You're right. And they should have done that because you have nothing to lose. And
that wasn't something I said afterwards. I was saying that as it was going on. The clock's ticking down. I'm like, what are you doing? Go try to score. And you're like, oh, I can see what he's doing. Didn't agree with it from the very beginning.
Yeah, I understand the strategy, though. If you have a chance to take a lead and you don't trust your quarterback, why not do it? And then they missed the 39-yard kick. So,
SC Neal says Jack Smith for clock management.
Jack would be good.
Oh my God, yeah, that'd be great to have Jack there as the clock management specialist. Though I don't know if people have done that, but they definitely should.
I don't have as big of an issue with his clock management this year as some people do. I thought he did the right thing against Penn State too.
Yeah, I thought it was bad. Feedy. And on Facebook. I love all the Facebook people. Thank you for joining in. Looking at 2025 schedule, where do you see USC will end up? And do you think we can make the playoffs? Here's what I'm going to say, because I've had a few people. I mean, I talked to Colin Cowherd the other day and yesterday, and he was talking about the easy schedule. USC lost to Maryland. So I don't want to hear anything about an easy schedule. Maryland has one Big Ten win. It was against USC. So until you fix that, I'm not worried about like, oh, it looks like they can go 10-2 because their 2 toughest games are on the road at Oregon and Notre Dame, which is true. And the rest of the schedule looks manageable. This year's schedule was very manageable. Like the 2 teams that were in the national championship game were mid at best, and you lost to both of them. I'm not worried about the schedule at all because you need to fix your own stuff. Because if you can lose to Maryland, you can lose to anybody. So yeah, the schedule sets up well, but you have to take care of your own business. It set up well this year, and USC didn't do it.
What have they shown to make you say, oh, they'll beat those teams that they should have beaten next season? I don't think we can say, like, does that bowl game make you say, oh, they finally won one of those close ones, they'll do it next year? You can't have that takeaway. So I'm with you on that. And, like, we got to see what they do to finish out the portal here. I can't be the only one who thinks 4 more addition. Like, no, they need at least 4 more guys.
4 position players is no bueno. Like, that's not enough. 4 position players was not enough.
They got to double that.
Yeah, you got a kicker, punter, or whatever. That's
but I mean, the record should be like if they go 6-6 next year. God, like the record should be better. They don't play LSU or an SEC team in the non-conference. Oregon is tough. Notre Dame on the road is tough. Outside of that, like Nebraska and Illinois on the road, not easy, but those are winnable games. Freaking UCLA beat Nebraska on the road this year. So
yeah,
they're opportunities.
Jeff says, "Say it louder, Ryan." Yes, no, I'm going to try to make this really clear because like if you're Penn State and you're like, okay, James Franklin beats everybody except Michigan and Ohio State, And then you look at their schedule like, oh, there's no Michigan. There's only Ohio State. You can project at that point. When you go 6-6 and lose to a whole bunch of teams you shouldn't lose to, I don't think you can project what's going to happen next year. That's more like worry about what you are, take care of. Like, yes, it looks like if you take care of your own business, you should win a bunch of games, but you haven't taken care of your own business. So you got to do that. We'll end on this one. Tony, this was the question I told you I didn't think was great. Trader Joe's or Aldi's? Yeah, Trader Joe's, Tony. Come on. They sponsor the show. We love Trader Joe's.
Has to be Trader Joe's.
Come on, man. But thank you, Tony. Thanks for everyone that, it was awesome. I know we had like 250 or something like people in the YouTube or somewhere in that range, and then a bunch of people on Facebook as well. So that was great. We'll try to keep doing our regular shows throughout the offseason, especially any updates of coaching hires, general manager hires, big portal additions, things like that. And we'll continue to do podcasts too. Basketball season's heating up with the women and the men, and the men seem to be turning the corner a little bit, and women got a big win over UConn. So I know the triple double podcast will be talking about some hoops with Connor and Shotgun, and we'll continue to do the Composite 2-Star Recruiting podcast. And I had a Harvey Hyde show earlier, so we'll keep doing our shows and keep talking about stuff in this offseason. So it should be a lot of fun. But I feel like you needed this one, Connor. You needed a win. It didn't look likely. It looked like it's going to be a long, long offseason. Not that it won't be still, but the win, I think, helped a lot.
Certainly. I thought it was done when it was 24/7. I said the offseason starts now. So I have egg on my face. That's for sure. I'm with you. I think if they had lost, but they came back and they took the 28-24 lead, like that would have stung. Getting blown out would have been a disaster.
Yes.
And that didn't happen. So that's good. Ryan, your guy, Mark Gronowski from South Dakota, I've been looking at the follows on Twitter of all the USC coaches. Luke Heward, the QB's coach, I don't know if he was previously following him, but he does follow the South Dakota State quarterback, Mark Gronowski, and you kind of made that link on X, and there was a big thread on the Peristyle about it. Let the rumors begin.
Do I make shit happen?
Yes.
Like that was our joke with your girlfriend Chloe. Like, hey man, I just have to make shit happen. So
you get it done.
We try to do that. There was literally people on the Peristyle like, oh, did Ryan know something? Like, no, I just saw like a very experienced quarterback entered the portal that's going to potentially be a one and done or go to the NFL. He's a potential NFL draftee too. And I was like, could USC be in the market for this one? It was only, not knowing anything on the USC side if they would be interested, but I don't know. Maybe I just spoke it into existence.
He should go to another college and get as much money as he can. I don't think it would be smart for him to go to the NFL. So we'll see.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is going to wrap things up for our Tunnel Vision / Peristyle podcast. Thanks again to Trader Joe's. Thanks to everyone who listened throughout the year, who wrote in, sent us reviews. We would still like to get some 5-star reviews. I got $42 gift cards from Trader Joe's now.
All right.
So mostly for the Podcast of Champions, but if we get some good reviews here, I'll give them away too, because Ohio State put up 42 points on Tennessee. So he told me earlier, he's like, okay, how many points Ohio State scores, that's how many dollars the gift card will be worth. So they put up 42 on Tennessee. So we got some good gift cards to give away.
Pretty good.
So yeah, leave us a 5-star review for the Peristyle Podcast on Apple Podcasts, and we would love to send you a Trader Joe's gift card for that if it's the best one. So make it funny, make us laugh, and we will do it. But Connor, you made me laugh all year. Another good one. Thank you. Even though you're overly optimistic in predicting USC season.
Yes.
7-5.
Yes.
They were 6-6.
That ended up being too good. Who would have freaking thought?
It's crazy. And but again, thanks to everyone for tuning in, listening, however you consume the content. So many people came up to us in Vegas and said hi. Thanks to everyone that came out to the meetup too. But it's great to hear from everyone. We love the interaction. We do our best to try to keep you guys informed and entertained about this crazy USC football program because it's pretty nutty. But Connor, great seeing you
Happy
again.
New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to everyone out there. Hope you guys enjoyed the show, and we will talk to you next time.